After a number of years as a fancy, irrelevant New England Patriots, a bit more exciting over the last couple of years. And I think that has continued to be the case this off-season, with one particularly exciting addition from a fancy point of view. I think QB is where we're starting for every show, but QB is where there is certainly the most interest when it comes to an emergent fancy prospect of the future in New England, isn't it, Ed?
Definitely. I mean, the likes of Jaden Daniels and Boutte stole the limelight in 2024, but Drake Maye had a very quietly impressive rookie season. Let's not forget, he didn't start until week 6, but he didn't let you down all season, really. Once he got into his groove, he was QB 18 or above every week bar one in what was a less than inspiring offense. And he had 3 top 10 quarterback finishes in that season. He did struggle a little bit with interceptions early on, but he'll have another off season to work on that with the offense. And I think the return of offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels will be a huge benefit to Maye. And they've upgraded at receiver as well. And they've also beefed up that O-line. Let's not forget, Maye, he's a decent scrambler. So I don't think QB 17, which is where he's going, roughly is overvaluing him. I think he's got a chance of top 15 this season. Would top 10 be a stretch? Possibly. But yeah, he showed the talent. He showed the kind of the metal and the capacity to have a very solid NFL career and decent fancy numbers.
I've got him down as projected to be QB 18, but it's one of the rare cases where I think actually this is probably the flaw that I see, because one key stat from last year, he averaged 37 rushing yards per game in those that he played last year. 5th, only behind Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, and Jalen Hurts. So he's got that in his locker. And I agree. I think he's got the potential for that breakout year 2. Absolutely. There will be some top 10 games, I think, in his repertoire as well. It's whether there's enough to push him up. He's an also sort of player that when we account for injuries through season as well, he could end up finding himself there or thereabouts by the end of the season. I'm really interested to see how Drake Maye shapes up over the course of the year. You said he's got some upgraded targets as well. It's definitely an interesting one. I would say from all the QBs, he is one who's on my list that I'm more interested to see the most how he progresses this season, both for real life NFL, but also for fantasy prospect too.
Yeah, I mean, he's right on the cusp for me. I'm debating whether in redraft leagues, whether I'd be happy to have him as my QB1, and I'm not quite sure he's there. Certainly as a QB2, and certainly in Superflex leagues, definitely he's someone I'd consider. But yeah, it's going to be exciting and interesting to see how he progresses this year.
I think that's a good point. When you say, we've spoken a few times that we don't usually draft backup QBs when it comes to redraft, but looking at some of the players that would be later in the order, if you were taking your QB very late and you're going for Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, Caleb Williams, if you do want then a security piece, I think you do a lot worse than Drake Maye at that point, because you could end up flipping those quite quickly into the season if he does come good.
Yeah, I think he's a very solid option. He performed well in what was a slightly underwhelming offense, and as I said, there have been upgrades in the O-line. We'll wait and see how they pan out, but that's all for his benefit in this upcoming season.
Next up, we turn to running back. Who do you want to talk about first?
Well, I know who you want to talk about, but let's just hang fire a little bit before we move on to your latest crush. And let's start with Rhamondre Stevenson at running back. Last year's RB 28. So he had a very quiet rookie season. And he looked on course to be a fancy stalwart after he finished as RB 7 in his sophomore season in 2022. But he stagnated over the last couple of seasons. Last year was supposed to be his year. He got the big 4-year extension, suggests that, but then he went and had probably the worst season of his career. Yes, the O-line was bad, but fumbling continues to be an issue for Stevenson. He does have upside, and he's got all the talent, he's got all the measurables as Rhamondre Stevenson that you need to be a success. But it's really a crossroad season for him because he's 27 years old. He had a disappointing season last season, and he does have somebody who will really push him this season.
And that's why I'm not going to draft Rhamondre Stevenson. I think where he's going is being drafted at his absolute ceiling. I see this as potentially being a bust year for Rhamondre. I've got him down as a weekly flex play. If you've got him on your lineup, he is difficult not to put in a flex spot because, like, for all the reasons you've said, last year as well, 7 top 24 finishes. He's still got that in him, but as soon as the Patriots drafted a running back again in the NFL draft, I was all out on Rhamondre. And say the player you're about to talk about next, I do adore. So I was never going to give a fair and balanced opinion on Rhamondre.
And to be fair to you, the fantasy community are in agreement because getting drafted about 4 rounds ahead of Rhamondre Stevenson is Mark's latest man crush, TreVeyon Henderson.
What a man, what a man, what a mighty, mighty man.
Yeah, you're all in on TreVeyon. The rookie second round pick. He wrapped up 42 rushing touchdowns over 4 seasons with Ohio State. He isn't massive, but he's rapid. And he's got the pass catching skills to be a dual threat running back for many years to come. How long before Henderson supplants Stevenson as the lead back in New England? Not long. I do think they will share the backfield a lot initially. So don't put all your eggs in Henderson early on in redraft leagues. RB26, which is where he's going, is about right for me. I certainly don't expect him to have a Bijan-style rookie season, and he's not been drafted as that. But I think his talent and his explosiveness will ensure he overtakes Rhamondre Stevenson this season.
Anywhere in dynasty rookie drafts, I've been drafting between 4 and 8. I've been hoping for Henderson. I should pick him up in a dynasty league we've been drafting this weekend at 6. I was very, very happy. I loved watching.
I was at 7, and I literally wish I would have bet £1 million. Oh, look who Mark's going to take at 6. So yeah, I knew I was getting no shares of Henderson in that particular league.
No, it's such a joy to watch. His pass catching work as well is amazing, and I think that's where one of the comparisons I have for Jahmyr Gibbs with him, but also in a Jahmyr Gibbs-like way. When you watch his tape from college, he can get a touchdown from anywhere on the field. He's off, and that is it. It's to the races. He's past everyone. He's amazing once he gets into the open field. And I completely agree. He's not going to be getting top tier numbers this year because Rhamondre will still get work. It'd be a lazy comparison after saying he reminds me of Gibbs to say they'll be like a Monty Gibbs combo. Stevenson isn't that same way. He's not as good, but they will be utilized in a similar-ish sort of way, and that will cap TreVeyon Henderson. I've put he'll emerge as an RB2 option. I think is a sort of player that if he has a slow start, I will be trying to prize away from people in any league I can. I think by the time we get to October and then the business end of the fantasy season, you'll be very, very glad you drafted him if you get him at cost this year.
Yeah, I do think, as I said earlier, that they've invested in Rhamondre Stevenson. They've given him a decent contract, so he will still get the reps. But long term, Stevenson is going to be a beast, surely.
Before we move on to wide receiver, please do take a moment to subscribe, to like, to share, and drop some comments below as well. And whilst you're on the channel, why don't you go and find some of our other deep dive shows to have a look at some of your other favourite teams or your favourite fantasy prospects. Also, probably a timely point to mention that we are recording this on the 6th of July. So if anything has changed since our record, we do humbly apologise for not predicting for you the future. But I think it's time we moved on to wide receiver and a player that if you're keen to draft, you might not want to miss the boat on, Mr. Stefon Diggs.
Yeah, there's really only one wide receiver to talk about in New England, and that is, of course, Diggs. 31 years old now, former fancy superstar. I think he's found himself a pretty perfect landing spot in New England, as he looks likely to be Drake Maye's go-to receiver. New England have invested a lot of money in Diggs, $63.5 million in a 3-year contract. That's big money for a player who's definitely in decline, but they're clearly confident he's over his late October ACL tear. He's no longer the deep threat he was, but he'll get a lot of short and intermediate targets from Drake Maye. And I think, he's going off the board as wide receiver 43. Now, that to me is someone who could be a bit of a steal. He's got an outside chance of being a wide receiver too, I would suggest. But I agree with you in saying that he's probably more like a weekly flex play. But yeah, Diggs hasn't really covered himself in glory over the last few years. But I do think he's ended up in a decent landing spot. And I think he will put up some decent numbers for the Patriots behind Drake Maye.
And I put him as a weekly flex play because if he was on my roster, I would be starting him in the flex spot every single week. But where he's being drafted is around players that you would probably have on the bench quite frequently as well. So he's going off alongside Brandon Ayuk, Javon Jennings, Jaden Reed. If I was staring those players down on the clock, I'm taking Diggs every single time because the ceiling for him, I mean, Brandon Ayuk's going slightly ahead of him, and we don't know when we're going to see Brandon Ayuk this season. You've spoken about Diggs' injury. I mean, he's one of those where I think we were saying towards the end of last season, he was probably all right earlier in the season. He knew he wanted to move. He knew he didn't want to aggravate anything. It's the sort of games a player like Diggs will play, but twinned with May, with a couple of players behind him, but no one to me of huge concern. He could prove to be a solid value. Not putting up wide receiver 1 numbers every week. We're not saying that. But if you're taking him at the point you're taking him in the draft, I would expect him to pay off there.
Yeah, he's. We have to take into account his age. Once you get north of 30, there are going to be concerns. But I do think with the situation he's in and with the lack of competition, I do think that there's some decent upside in Diggs.
Should we move to the new man in New England at wide receiver next?
Yeah, once you get past Diggs, there are quite a few other options there. But yeah, they have got an exciting rookie prospect in New England, and that's Kyle Williams. 69th overall pick in the draft this year. Definitely has a chance to be Drake Maye's number 1 threat. He had a very impressive 4.40 60-yard dash at the combine. Having a strong-armed, aggressive quarterback could really benefit him in his rookie year, and definite flex potential for sure.
Yeah, he's a very, very interesting player that I think could become a reliable flex play as the season moves on, and potentially this time next year, as you say, we could be talking about as the wide receiver 1 in New England. Yeah, he's an exciting prospect. And when we look just beneath him, I think the reason I feel more confident in Kyle Williams being that number 2 with the potential to leapfrog Diggs at some point is that there's some players I think we probably already know who they are by this point that are sat behind him.
Yeah, there are 3 other wide receivers who we're going to have a quick talk about, and I don't think any of them are really going to trouble the scorers, so to speak. You've got Demario Douglas, seemed to earn a role in the slot last year, but wide receiver 3 is his limit. He won't get the workload to be fantasy relevant. Kaysho Boutte, like Douglas, he's in the mix, but will need injuries really to do anything of note. And Kendrick Bourne, 29. I think New England are probably looking to move on from Bourne, and there's a chance he might well be traded. So, yeah, I think all 3 of those aren't really going to have much of an impact.
No, I'd be inclined to agree with that as well. And they'll all have flashes. They will all have some big plays. Boutte, we saw have a few plays last year where we thought, oh, is he going to come? So and it just didn't really happen. Strange things have happened, though. I just think it is more likely that Kyle Williams is going to get a little bit of fantasy relevance over any of these 3. Continues to be a little bit murky. I mean, it's been actually, when we spoke so far, there's some good fantasy options, but at tight end, we're right on the cusp of where it starts to get a little bit murky if you're waiting to this sort of player for a tight end pick in your redraft leagues, aren't we?
Yes, we're looking at Hunter Henry, who I can't believe that Hunter Henry is 30 years old. He's entering his 9th season in the NFL, and he had a solid 2024. He seemed to build up a decent rapport with Drake Maye. In 11 games together, Henry averaged 44.9 yards on 6.5 targets, but he only managed 2 touchdowns. You probably want a few more from your tight end. He's another player who's probably going to benefit from an improved offense. There's going to be more scoring opportunities across the board. But yeah, the arrival of Diggs is going to is going to have surely an impact on Henry's involvement and Henry's reps. Tight end 21, which is where he's going off the board, does seem to undervalue him because I think he's got a role in the offense. Certainly, ahead of the likes of Boutte, etc. So tight end 12 last season was very solid. And he was tight end 19, I think, in 2023. So slight upside potentially. But yeah, I'm not sure, like you say, if he's someone I'm going to rely on.
If you end up with Hunter Henry on your roster, it's because you've got another lower pick tight end, most likely you're going to want to be rotating, or it'd be the sort of player that'll probably find himself being plugged into lineups as the bye weeks creeping and being a back and forth on the waiver wire sort of player, unless a real prominent role emerges with Drake Maye. So we didn't see it last year. 6 top 12 finishes. Not bad, though, for a player that was being drafted ADP tight 20. He definitely repaid that if you took him. I just imagine most people either missed out on those points or only got them if they plugged him in on any given week. Do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in the same sort of ballpark when it comes to Hunter Henry.
Well, that takes us to the end of our deep dive into the New England Patriots. What do you reckon the season will look like for the Patriots? I think they seem to be, after the glory years, a horrible little trough of the Mac Jones experiment, they seem to be a team that are taking steps back in the right direction.
Yeah, I think they look like they found a quarterback to build their future around, and if the likes of Kyle Williams make that kind of step forward, and TreVeyon Henderson is what we expect. Maybe not this year, but in the next couple of years, they could really progress on to be competitive. I don't think they'll make the playoffs this year, but I think they could end up with 6-7 wins potentially.
Well, if you enjoyed this show, please do give us a subscribe, a like, a share, drop a comment below as well. Let us know which players you agree with, which you disagree with, and which you think we have done pretty much perfect predictions on. And then go and check out one of the other deep dive shows on each of the other NFL teams, as well as all our other content we have available for you, both in the off season and then as we go into the season come September. But for now, that's all from me. That's all from Ed. And it's time for Malcolm to take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.